I'm Ava Lynn, 34 freelance designer and the forgotten cousin at every family gathering. The room was glowing amber from the fire-lit chandeliers above. A long mahogany dining table stretched across the ballroom of my aunt's country estate, ornate with pumpkin centerpieces, gold leaf name cards, and crystal wine goblets. It was Thanksgiving, a grand one, the kind where linen napkins came folded into birds, and no one dared touch the mashed potatoes until Grandma blessed the table. Except this year. I wasn't at the table. I was near the kitchen entrance, holding a foil-wrapped tray of my signature rosemary cornbread still warm, balanced on my hip like a baby I wasn't allowed to set down. I scanned for an empty seat, even a stool in the corner. Nothing. Just chatter, silverware, and chairs, all full. I approached the head caterer, a thin woman in black with a headset and clipboard. "Hi, I brought the cornbread," I said, soft, smiling. She barely looked up. "Family seating is prearranged. Are you with staff?" I blinked. "No. I'm Ava. Ava Lynn, Grace's niece." She scanned the list, flipped a page, looked back at me. "I don't see your name. Maybe just leave it in the back with the other donations. Like I'd dropped off a canned good at a food drive." I stepped back, pulse loud in my ears. The scent of thyme and roasted turkey swirled around me, thick with the warmth of belonging, just not for me. On the far end of the room, I spotted my cousin Madeline lifting a glass. "To family traditions," she said, "and to Claire and Jonathan for hosting the real Thanksgiving. We all know not everyone can." Laughter. A few nods. Some awkward sips. My aunt smiled tightly but didn't object. I held onto the tray like it tethered me to the floor. If you've ever brought something from your heart and been told it didn't belong, if you've ever been politely erased from your own family's picture, drop a comment, or let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if you've ever felt like the invisible one at a table meant for love. Then came the click of polished shoes. A man in a slate gray suit, clean-shaven, tall, the kind of presence that made people hush without trying, stepped inside. His eyes scanned the room, pausing on me. Then he spoke to the room. "Excuse me, is Ava Lynn here?" Silence spread like wine spilling over lace. I swallowed. "Yes." He walked to me with a professional nod, then turned to the guests. "Miss Lynn, the resort in Ubud confirms the private villas and first-class arrangements are complete. The chef also wanted your feedback on the seafood menu before confirming." Aunt Grace dropped her fork. Madeline coughed on her champagne. Someone at the kids' table muttered, "What's Ubud?" I held the tray tighter. "I'll wait outside for final details," he said, nodding, then leaving just as quietly. All eyes turned toward me. All those gold name cards, perfectly arranged, all that tradition, all that silence, now watching me. The cornbread tray, still warm, began to tremble slightly in my hands, and just like that, I felt the air shift. I didn't say anything, not right away. I just stood there for a beat, letting the warmth from the cornbread calm the shake in my hands. My fingers sank slightly into the foil as I inhaled the quiet. I wasn't used to this kind of attention from them. Not the kind that comes when someone has questions, not when I was usually the one asking. I looked across the room again. Claire, my aunt's daughter, had her wine glass halfway to her lips, frozen. Her husband Jonathan was staring at me, his brow furrowed like I was a pop quiz. My brother Eli, sitting next to them, raised both eyebrows and mouthed. What just happened? I didn't answer. I couldn't yet. Instead, I turned, walked past the buffet tables, and headed outside. The cool air hit like a splash of clarity. It was late afternoon, golden light slanting through skeletal trees. I found the man in the gray suit waiting by a sleek black car parked at the end of the long gravel drive. "I'm sorry," I said. "I think you just gave my entire family a small heart attack." He cracked a polite smile. "As you requested. Just enough shock to be memorable, not enough to cause lawsuits." I laughed, actually laughed, and it felt like a small rebellion against everything I'd been taught to suppress, to play small, to be polite, to wait my turn. "Thanks, Michael," I said. "You did great." He opened the car door and handed me a slim folder. Confirmation numbers, guest list, villa assignments. I also included the itinerary and spa preferences for your aunts. The private chef has already received the dietary notes. I took it with both hands. It was heavier than I expected. Maybe because it represented something I hadn't dared speak out loud until now. I could afford this. I could give something no one expected of me. Michael got back into the car, and I returned inside. The energy in the room had changed, but no one said anything immediately. Not directly. But I could feel their stares press into my back as I placed the cornbread tray onto a serving platter by the appetizers. Then Aunt Grace approached. She looked the same as always: pearl necklace, rose-colored cardigan, and that ever-present polite tightness in her jaw. "So, you're flying the family to Bali?" she asked, voice low, almost disbelieving. I nodded. "Yes. First class." I nodded again. "Villas too, with private pools. I thought it might be nice to celebrate somewhere no one has to cook or clean." She didn't respond right away, just blinked. "When did you start making that kind of money?" I didn't start. "I've been making it for a while. I just never told anyone." A moment passed. Then she looked down at the cornbread and muttered, "Well, let me know if you need help with RSVPs." That was as close to approval as I'd ever gotten from her. The rest of the evening played out like a cautious play. People were curious now, but no one asked directly. I heard whispers. Does she have a boyfriend? Is she selling something? Did she win the lottery? And of course, she always did keep to herself. They said it like a criticism before. Now it sounded more like a mystery. And to be honest, it was easier to keep to myself. The last time I tried to share something with the family, it had backfired. I was 27, newly signed with a European home goods startup. I'd been brought on as lead visual designer and had just wrapped a campaign that went viral. I was proud, so proud I printed out mock-ups and brought them to Thanksgiving that year, hoping to show someone, anyone. But I never got past the coat room. Madeline cornered me on the way in, showing off her latest engagement ring, her second one in 3 years. "You're still doing, like, Etsy logos and stuff?" she asked. "Not exactly," I'd said. "I'm leading international packaging design now." She blinked. "Oh, like boxes and stuff." Boxes and stuff. That year, I left the mock-ups under my coat and didn't mention them again. I'd learned. Keep the wins to yourself. Let them think you're quiet because you're uncertain, not because you've outgrown the room. But this time was different. The idea started small. After a particularly painful Zoom call the year before, one where they forgot to include me in the virtual family toast, I realized I didn't want to keep waiting to be invited into a space that would always see me as the kid who brought clearance wine and store-bought pie. So I started saving, a little each month. I researched group retreats, looked up airfare logistics, found luxury locations that could host a family of 18 without making it feel like a company retreat. Bali wasn't my first idea. I thought about a cabin in Oregon, or maybe a vineyard in Napa. But then I remembered Aunt Grace once said she'd always dreamed of visiting Southeast Asia but never had the time. So I made it happen, quietly, without asking for anyone's input. No one knew, not even Eli. I booked the flights, reserved the villas, confirmed the chefs, and then sent a courier to deliver engraved invitation cards to every family member with golden script. You are invited to a Thanksgiving celebration of rest, warmth, and no dishwashing. Bali, Indonesia. November 2028. The RSVP deadline was today. Back in the dining hall, the conversation had shifted. Claire was now huddled with her sister near the fireplace, casting glances my way. My Uncle Greg, who once offered me $100 to get a real job, was now asking Eli what exactly I did online. I walked past them and grabbed a sparkling water from the buffet. Someone tapped my shoulder. It was Grandma. Her face was soft, her eyes a bit teary from the wine or maybe something else. "I didn't know you could do something like this," she said. I smiled. I didn't know either. Until I did. She took my hand in hers, her skin cool and delicate. "You were always watching, always listening. I just wish we'd looked a little harder back." I nodded, unable to say much more, because in that moment, I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to prove anything. I just wanted to sit next to her and feel like someone finally saw me without needing me to perform smallness for comfort. And maybe that was enough for tonight. The next morning, I woke up to 10 unread texts, 4 missed calls, and 1 group chat that hadn't been active since my cousin's baby shower 2 years ago. Group name Family Ties. It had never included me before. Now I was the first name on the new list. Madeline, wait. This Bali thing is real. Jonathan, I thought it was a prank. Is there actually a private chef involved? Claire, I need to know if kids are welcome. Asher has allergies. Eli, yo, Ava, what did you do? Everyone's freaking out, lol. I scrolled through the messages slowly, letting the disbelief wash over me like ocean tide. It wasn't the interest that stunned me. It was the tone. Not sarcasm, not dismissal, curiosity. For the first time in years, they weren't ignoring me. They were scrambling to catch up. I typed out a reply. Aunt Grace has the itinerary. Yes. Kids are welcome. I've already coordinated allergy-safe meals with the chef. Just make sure your passports are current. Flights leave in 2 weeks. I hit send. Simple. No emojis. No explanations. Then I turned off my phone. The truth was, I hadn't done any of this to impress them. I had done it for the part of me that still cried after Thanksgiving 3 years ago, when I sat alone in my apartment with a bowl of microwaved stuffing and the sound of laughter echoing from a muted Instagram story. That was the year they accidentally forgot to include me in the family invite list. "I thought you were out of town," Eli had said. "Weren't you in Berlin or something?" I was. But that didn't mean I didn't want the invite. I'd been designing digital brand kits for eco-sustainable startups in Europe, quietly collecting invoices that slowly built into the kind of savings I never imagined I'd have. But every time I mentioned work, I saw their eyes glaze over like I was speaking a different language, so I stopped speaking. Until now, that afternoon, I met Eli at a small cafe in Chinatown. He was already seated, sipping something iced and overly sweet, wearing a denim jacket that made him look too young for 31. "You really pulled the rug out from under them," he said, shaking his head as I sat down. "Uncle Greg keeps telling people you sold an app." I laughed. "No apps. Just design. Years of it. International clients. Quiet bank account." "Why didn't you tell me?" I shrugged. "You were busy. You had your own stuff. I didn't want to seem like I was trying to one-up anyone." He leaned forward, his voice softer. "Ava, no one even knew you were in the race. You hid it too well." I stared down at the table's glossy surface. I think I was afraid of changing the narrative, of who I'd become if I wasn't the one they pitied anymore. He nodded, slowly. "But now you're the one flying them to Bali." "Yeah," I said, a little breathless. "Now I am." We sat there for a while, sipping drinks and watching the afternoon crowd blur past the window. It felt surreal. Like I'd cracked some invisible ceiling I hadn't even realized was there. When I got back to my apartment that evening, I finally opened the box in my closet labeled "Don't Show Them." It was full of things I'd hidden over the years: the print magazine that featured one of my branding campaigns, a thank you note from a CEO who said I'd helped save their product launch, a handwritten testimonial from a French boutique owner who mailed me a silk scarf with my invoice. I took them out, one by one, and laid them across my living room floor. Not to show off, not to gloat, just to see myself, to remember. I wasn't poor, I wasn't behind, I wasn't disposable. I was just quiet. And now I was done being quiet. The next few days were a blur of logistics. Claire called to confirm her RSVP, asking detailed questions about sleeping arrangements and childcare options. Jonathan emailed me a list of dietary considerations that included things like no parsley and low-sodium soy sauce. Even Madeline, who once sneered at my thrift store boots, left me a voice message that ended with, "Honestly, this is impressive. I didn't know you had it in you." I didn't respond. Some moments deserve to remain unanswered. Aunt Grace, however, surprised me. She called directly. "Ava," she said, voice calm but cautious. "I just wanted to say thank you. No one's ever done something like this for the family before." "You're welcome," I said. "I wanted it to feel different." "It does," she admitted. "It really does." There was a long pause before she added, "And I'm sorry if we ever made you feel less than. That wasn't my intention. That one caught me." I let the silence hang for a few seconds before replying. "It's not about intentions anymore, Aunt Grace. It's about showing up. And this year, I am." When we hung up, I sat alone in the stillness, the city's hum just faint outside the window. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just let it settle. There's something deeply strange about being seen for the first time after years of invisibility. It doesn't feel triumphant. It feels tender, like a bruise being touched. And still, I didn't regret it, because sometimes the only way to be heard is to speak in a language they can't ignore: action. 2 weeks later, we boarded the plane, all 18 of us, first-class seats, champagne before takeoff, hot towels passed gently from white-gloved hands. I watched as Madeline reclined her seat with the awkward joy of someone unaccustomed to luxury. Uncle Greg filmed a shaky selfie video whispering, "This is wild," while his wife unpacked a tray of snacks like she was defusing a bomb. And Claire gave me a long look as she fastened Asher's seatbelt beside her, then mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded back. No words needed. We were headed somewhere none of them had expected. Not just across the globe, but across the threshold of what they thought I could be. And I was just getting started. The Bali airport was humid, fragrant, and softly chaotic, with the scent of incense hanging in the air like an invisible welcome. As we stepped out of the jet bridge, flower garlands were gently draped around our necks by resort staff, and the kids laughed as they tried to pronounce the Balinese greetings printed on laminated welcome cards. A line of black SUVs waited just outside customs, engines humming, drivers in crisp white uniforms holding signs with our names printed in gold. Everyone looked at me, not with mockery, not with amusement, with questions. Claire adjusted her sunglasses. "Ava, did you organize all of this?" I nodded. "Yes. You'll each have a personal butler, too. They've already memorized your food preferences and the kids' nap schedules." Her jaw dropped slightly, then closed as she turned toward the car. I wasn't trying to be smug, but I didn't flinch anymore when people looked at me that way, like I had quietly rewritten the rules while they weren't paying attention. As the convoy drove toward Ubud, the landscape shifted from glossy airport sprawl to rich green jungle, winding roads, and terraced rice fields rippling in the wind. Grandma reached for my hand in the back seat. "This is something else," she whispered. "You made this happen." I glanced at her, then down at our intertwined fingers. Her skin was soft and speckled with age, but she held on tightly. "I just wanted us to be somewhere where no one had to serve or be served," I said. "Just be." The villas were waiting on a hillside, a cluster of cream-colored stone lodges carved into the forest, each one with an infinity pool that looked out over a mist-covered valley. Birds called softly from trees, and the air smelled like frangipani and lemongrass. A staff member guided each family member to their private suite. Asher, Claire's son, immediately cannonballed into the shallow pool outside his villa while his dad tried to yell in a whisper. Uncle Greg stood in the foyer of his suite muttering, "This is nicer than our honeymoon." I wandered back to my own space, a small corner villa with glass doors that opened directly onto the jungle. The walls were lined with light wood, the bedding was crisp, and for once, the silence felt like luxury, not loneliness. There was a knock. Eli stepped in with a towel slung over his shoulder and a sheepish look on his face. "So," he said, "Claire and Jonathan want to know if there's a dress code for tonight's dinner." I grinned. "Tell them to wear whatever makes them feel like themselves." He hesitated. "And Greg wants to know if there's going to be, like, speeches." "No speeches," I said. "Just food. And maybe a little music. We're not in Connecticut anymore." He laughed. "You're killing them, Ava, in the best way." That evening, I walked down the torchlit pathway to the central open-air dining pavilion. Long wooden tables had been set under woven lanterns, flickering against the dusk. A live gamelan band played softly in the background as a row of chefs plated intricate meals beneath a canopy of banana leaves and carved wood. As each family member arrived, they slowed. The chaos quieted. Even the kids looked around in awe. Grandma sat beside me. She wore a silk shawl that fluttered in the wind, her gray hair pulled back neatly. "It's beautiful," she said simply. The meal began in silence, not out of awkwardness but reverence. No one reached for their phones. No one made a sarcastic comment about portion size or ingredients they couldn't pronounce. It wasn't until dessert, when tiny coconut puddings were placed in front of us like pearls in ceramic shells, that Madeline spoke. "So, Ava," she began, gently tapping her spoon. "How long have you been like this?" I tilted my head. Like what? She blushed. "Successful, independent, capable of pulling this off." The table chuckled softly. I looked around. 18 people who once only saw me through the lens of pity or forgetfulness. Now waiting, watching, listening. "A while," I said. "I just didn't think anyone would want to hear about it. So I kept it to myself." Jonathan leaned forward. "But why? Why keep it a secret?" I swallowed, suddenly aware of how quiet it was again. "Because the story you all told about me was easier," I said. "The girl with cheap boots. The one who brought store-bought pies. The cousin who didn't go to grad school. I was the forgettable one. And it was easier for you if I stayed that way." No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to still. But I wasn't forgettable. I added, "I was just quiet. And busy, building something you didn't understand." Claire reached for her wine glass and nodded slowly. "I think we all underestimated you." I looked her in the eye. "That wasn't the problem. The problem was, you liked it that way." More silence. Then Grandma reached over and placed her hand on mine again. "I see you now," she said. Her voice trembled. "And I'm proud. That broke something in me. Not pain, not anger, a kind of release." Eli stood up. "I think we should toast," he said, raising his glass. To Ava, for reminding us that some stories are worth rewriting. Everyone followed. Glasses clinked. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for a seat at their table. I'd built one of my own. Later that night, after the lanterns had been dimmed and the wine had been poured one last time, I stood at the edge of the pool outside my villa. Fireflies danced in the air like shy stars, and the jungle hummed softly with life. I dipped my feet into the water. There was no applause, no dramatic finale, just a quiet fullness in my chest. No more begging to be seen, no more shrinking to be loved. This time, I showed up as I was, and they had no choice but to meet me there. The next morning began with birdsong sharp, melodic calls that cut through the misty air like delicate glass. I stepped onto the villa's stone patio barefoot, wrapped in a linen robe, my hair still damp from the early shower, a tray of papaya, dragon fruit, and jasmine tea had already been delivered, placed with quiet precision by someone I'd never seen. Everything here moved gently, except my thoughts. My phone buzzed beside the tea, a message from Eli. They want to do a group hike. You in? I smiled, typed back. I'll meet you all at the main gate. 10 minutes later, we were assembled by the entrance. Each of us handed woven bamboo hats and bottled water by a resort guide. Madeline complained about the incline. Jonathan adjusted his designer sunglasses, and the kids fought over who got to walk closest to the front. I watched from the back. It was strange, seeing them out of their element, sweaty, sun-drenched, hair frizzy, without the armor of expensive coats and dinner party smiles. And yet, somehow, it made them more human. Halfway up the trail, Aunt Grace slowed beside me. This place is magnificent, she said between breaths. I don't know how you found it. I shrugged. Research, patience, years of dreaming about silence. She chuckled. Silence. Around this bunch, I gave a half smile. Not their silence. Mine. She paused, glancing at me. You're different now. Ava, I was always like this. I replied. You just weren't looking. That stopped her. We kept walking. At the summit, the jungle gave way to a wide plateau. The view stretched endlessly, layers of green, distant mountains rising like waves, a pale blue sky hanging soft above it all. Claire took a photo. Grandma stood quietly, her eyes glistening. No one spoke. Not even the kids. It was the kind of silence that demanded reverence, and I realized, in that moment, I didn't need them to say anything. I just needed them to be here. That night, dinner was served on a floating platform over the central pool, candlelight flickering against the ripples. A traditional Balinese dance performance unfolded nearby, the dancers' golden headdresses glinting like ancient crowns, their movements slow and haunting. Between courses, I slipped away. I walked the edge of the resort, feet brushing gravel and moonlit moss, until I found the cliffside terrace. A carved stone bench waited there, empty and cool. I sat, and then Eli joined me. He didn't say anything at first, just handed me a folded napkin. Inside was a drawing, a sketch of the family dinner from last night, done in ballpoint pen, quick and rough, but unmistakably beautiful. You drew this, I asked. Started it on the plane, he said. Finished it after dessert. I ran my finger along the ink lines. There I was, seated in the center, lanterns glowing above. Grandma's hand on mine. It felt important. He added quietly, like we were watching something shift. I nodded. It was never about revenge. I just wanted to be remembered differently. You will be, he said. You already are. We sat there for a long time, letting the breeze thread through our hair and the jungle hum beneath us. Then Eli said, "Do you think they'll go back to forgetting I thought about it?" "Maybe," I said. "Old habits don't die easy, but now they'll know what they missed." He smiled at that. Later that week, on the last night of the trip, I hosted a quiet farewell on the villa's upper deck. No speeches, just handmade coconut cocktails, soft jazz drifting from a speaker, and a long table of flickering tea lights. Aunt Grace approached me with a folded card in her hand. "It's not much," she said, pressing it into my palm, "but I thought you should have this." I waited until she walked away, then opened it. It was a handwritten thank you note. Just a few lines. "I see you now. I'm sorry it took so long." For her, that was monumental. Madeline came next, holding 2 teacups. She handed one to me and leaned against the railing. I was jealous. "You know," she said, "I always assumed you were stuck. Turns out, you were just elsewhere, building." I said, sipping the tea, "and it was lonely." She nodded. "Yeah, but maybe that's where the real stuff gets made." That surprised me. Not because it was profound, but because it came from her. For the first time, I didn't see her as the girl who once rolled her eyes at my Payless shoes. I saw her as someone who'd built a version of safety around comparison, and now, maybe, she was loosening her grip. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months, not because they'd changed, but because I had. The morning of our departure, we lined up again at the SUVs, bags packed, passports in hand. Claire was already planning an album titled Bali, the Lin Family Awakens. At the airport gate, Grandma turned to me and said, "You know, this might be the first Thanksgiving I'll remember not for what we ate, but for who we noticed." I hugged her. Long. On the flight back, I sat by the window. The sun rose over the wing, casting a golden line across the sky like a quiet promise. I opened my notebook and began sketching. Not a logo, not a brand board, just the view. My life, as it finally was. Landing back in the States was like stepping into a colder, grayer version of everything we'd just left behind. The airport was crowded, voices sharp and hurried, the smell of recycled air pressing against the jet lag in our lungs. No one greeted us with garlands, no staff lined up with ginger tea, but something had shifted anyway. They didn't rush ahead of me anymore. They waited. We rode down the escalator together, our suitcases rumbling behind us in loose syncopation. Even Uncle Greg, usually the first to disappear, the second the wheels hit the tarmac, stood close, still buzzing from the afterglow of being pampered and seen in paradise. Outside, Claire turned to me with her phone half raised. "Can I share the Bali album on Facebook now?" she asked. I smirked. "You waited this long." She grinned. I was trying to be respectful. "Go ahead," I said. "Let them wonder." By the time I got home, my inbox was flooded. Not with clients, not with invoices, with family. Aunt Grace had sent over a list of artisan retreat centers she thought I'd enjoy for future trips. Madeline tagged me in 3 posts with captions like "cousin goals" and "never underestimate the quiet ones." Jonathan forwarded me a podcast about entrepreneurship with a message. "This made me think of you." And Eli. He sent a photo from the hike, a candid shot of me standing just behind the group, arms crossed loosely, a sliver of sky stretching behind me like it belonged there. His caption read, "You didn't just take us to Bali. You showed us who you are?" I stared at it for a long time, not because it was sentimental, but because it was real. I'd never asked to be glorified. I'd only asked to be recognized. But now, people were finally listening. Still, old habits die hard. 2 days later, Aunt Grace invited me to a post-trip dinner at her house. Nothing fancy, she'd said. Just family catching up and decompressing. I hesitated. The idea of walking back into the very same home where I was once mistaken for kitchen staff left a strange knot in my chest, but something in me wanted to go. Not for them. For me. To stand there again, not as the outsider, not as the charity case, but as someone who knew her worth whether or not anyone clapped. I brought a simple dessert. Homemade this time. A tart with gingered pears and almond cream. When I arrived, the house smelled like rosemary and nostalgia. I stepped inside and was actually greeted with hugs, with smiles that reached eyes, with people offering me drinks before I even set down my coat. There was no kids' table this time, only one long table with my name card tucked neatly beside Grandma's. I sat down. Aunt Grace looked at me across the mashed potatoes and said, "You set a new bar." "Ava." I raised an eyebrow. "For family vacations, no?" she said. "For how we show up for each other. For how we see each other." It was strange. After years of proving, explaining, shrinking, I didn't need to say anything now. Just being in the room was enough. After dinner, as we sat sipping warm cider, Madeline leaned over. "I didn't think it was possible for any of us to change," she said. "But I'm starting to wonder. You don't have to change." I told her. "Just stop pretending you already know everyone's story." She stared at her mug, nodded slowly. "Including yours. Especially mine." The room fell quiet again, a kind of collective exhale. No one fought. No one performed. We just were. After the plates were cleared and Grandma fell asleep on the couch with a crocheted blanket, I slipped outside. The night air was crisp and dry, bare trees stretching above like ribs. I stood on the porch alone. Then Eli joined me. He handed me a flask. "Not Bali," he said, "but still good." I sipped. Vanilla and cinnamon, warmth that lingered. We didn't say much, but I knew we didn't have to anymore. Eventually, I asked, "Do you think they'll go back to the way things were?" He shook his head. "Even if they try, you won't." That mattered. I'd stopped asking to be invited. Now I built the rooms myself, and those who noticed were welcome to sit with me. Not above, not below, beside. When I left that night, no one asked what I was doing next. No one treated me like a mystery to solve. They just said, "Drive safe. Call us. See you soon." And it felt good. Not because I was finally accepted, but because I no longer needed their acceptance to validate who I'd become. Bali had been more than a vacation. It had been a mirror, held up to every version of myself they never saw, and I no longer flinched at the reflection. Back in my apartment, I unpacked slowly. I took the thank you cards, the sketches, the photos, and placed them into a scrapbook labeled "Not Forgotten." Then I tucked it into the bookshelf, next to my old sketch pads and client portfolios. Not to display, not to boast, just to remember. Because memory, once denied, is now mine to keep. And no one can edit me out again. A few weeks passed. Thanksgiving faded into December, and with it, the buzz surrounding the Bali trip began to settle. The group chat grew quieter, less memes, fewer remember when photos. Life crept back to its usual rhythms, but something had changed. Subtle things. Eli started calling me just to talk, not to mediate drama, not to pass on updates, just to talk. He sent me a photo of a new sketch, one of Grandma, dozing in her villa hammock in Bali, hair tousled, hands folded over her chest like she'd never known unrest. Madeline followed me on Instagram. For the first time, she liked a post that wasn't a birthday shout-out. Then she DM'd me, "Hey, can you recommend a web designer? I'm thinking of launching a home line." I nearly dropped my phone. She didn't ask me to do it for her. She didn't assume I was too free. She asked like I was an authority. That recognition wasn't everything, but it made me smile. The biggest change, though, came from within. I stopped tiptoeing. I updated my portfolio site to include the bigger brands I'd worked with, no more vague select clients. I started sharing my creative process on social media. People responded. Strangers messaged me to say my work felt intimate but sharp, clean but soulful. I even said yes to a podcast interview. The host introduced me as a quiet force in modern design, and I laughed into the mic, not because it was funny, but because it was true. And for once, I wasn't afraid to own it. One chilly Thursday afternoon, I got a call from Grandma. She never called. Usually just wrote cards or had someone relay messages through Eli, but this time, she called herself. Her voice crackled through the speaker like old vinyl. "I was wondering," she said, "do you think you could help me frame some photos? Photos of what I asked. The ones from the trip. The ones where I look like I belong somewhere warm." I laughed. "Of course, Grandma. I'll come by next week. Bring that cornbread too. The real kind. Deal." I hung up, grinning, and stared out the window. It wasn't just about Bali. It was about return, coming back and being invited to stay. But not everything changed. One Sunday, I stopped by Aunt Grace's house to drop off a gift I'd picked up in Ubud, a carved wooden incense box I thought she might like for her meditation corner. She answered the door with a polite smile. "Oh, Ava, that's lovely. Come in, won't you?" I stepped inside. The house looked the same. Marble counters, abstract art, a faint scent of lavender oil. She led me to the sitting room, and we exchanged small talk over tea. But I noticed it, again, that tightness in her tone, that old, familiar edge. She brought up Claire's new job promotion, Jonathan's growing consulting business. Then she looked at me and said, "You know, it's nice you did all that for the family, but you don't have to keep proving yourself." My hands tightened around the cup. "I'm not," I said. "I'm just living." She gave a quick smile, not quite reaching her eyes. "Right. Of course." I finished my tea, thanked her, and left. And as I walked down the front steps, I felt it again, that line. The one some people refuse to cross, even when you've built the bridge for them. But I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel erased. I just felt free. That night, I lit one of the incense sticks from the box I kept for myself. I sat by the window, cross-legged, sketchpad open, letting the smoke curl around my hair like memory. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. What I chose to carry, what I chose to set down. A few days later, Claire invited me to help her plan Grandma's 90th birthday. "You have the best taste," she wrote. "I want this one to be different, real, thoughtful, not just another banquet." I said yes, because I didn't need to host it all. Sometimes, showing up meant helping others learn how to do it right. At the planning meeting, Claire unrolled a giant mood board with fabric swatches and color palettes. I was thinking, maybe we do it outside. Something simple. Wooden tables, fairy lights. I nodded. Less spectacle, more soul. Exactly. And just like that, we were building something new. Not a vacation this time. A legacy. Weeks passed. Winter deepened. My Bali photos faded from the top of my feed, replaced by new clients, cozy interiors, and sketches by candlelight. But the feeling stayed. That wholeness, that quiet, rooted confidence. One night, I got a call from Madeline. Her voice was different, slower, less polished. "I've been thinking," she said. About how many times I brushed you off. Like you didn't matter. I didn't say anything. She went on. I think I was scared. You were always doing something I couldn't explain, and instead of asking, I just ignored it. I let the silence breathe, then said, You don't have to fix the past. Just don't repeat it. She exhaled. I'd like to visit Bali again someday. Maybe, on my own, to see it differently. You should, I said. It's quieter when you go alone, but sometimes that's when you hear the most. After we hung up, I stared at the ceiling and let the stillness wrap around me like a second skin. I used to think being forgotten was the worst fate. Now I knew better. Being misunderstood, that was the real exile. And finding my way back to myself loudly, softly, fiercely, that was the return. There would be more holidays, more dinners, more rooms that once didn't hold a place for me, but now, I walked in without asking. And whether they clapped or not, I stayed. Spring arrived slowly that year, as if even the seasons were hesitating, waiting for permission to bloom. The air shifted gently, warm in the afternoons, still cold enough to pull a sweater close in the mornings. I found myself walking more, taking detours through parks, past farmers' markets, past houses with peeling paint and tulips trying their best. The Bali trip became a memory more than a headline. It stopped being the thing people asked about first. It became folded into the version of me they now expected, the one who booked flights in secret, who knew how to turn silence into generosity. And with that, a strange new calm arrived. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I was just living. Claire and I finished planning Grandma's 90th birthday party by mid-April. We went with her idea garden dinner, linen tablecloths, string lights, and live acoustic music from a local guitarist named Mason who wore flannel and never once talked over his instrument. We kept it intimate. Just family, a few neighbors, and the nurse who came twice a week to check Grandma's blood pressure. I arrived early that afternoon, hands full of pear galettes and a gift box wrapped in navy silk. Claire was already there, barefoot on the grass, trying to secure paper lanterns before the wind stole them. She looked up. You're late. I raised an eyebrow. By 3 minutes. She laughed. In this family, that's an improvement. We worked side by side in quiet rhythm. No backhanded compliments, no subtle jabs, just two women setting a table, arranging tulips, breathing in the moment without trying to control it. Grandma arrived just before sunset, wearing a lavender cardigan and soft cream trousers. Her hair was pinned up like always, but with a flower tucked behind her ear, Asher's idea, apparently. She stepped into the yard, paused at the sight of the table, then smiled wide enough to crinkle her whole face. Oh, she whispered. You remembered the lanterns? I remembered everything. I said. Dinner was slow, soft, layered with warm laughter. Someone passed around baby pictures. Someone else tried to teach the kids how to play a folk song on an out-of-tune ukulele. Halfway through the meal, Grandma tapped her glass with a spoon and cleared her throat. I won't make a speech, she said, but I will say something. Everyone turned to her. She glanced around. A family isn't built in a single moment, but sometimes, a single moment shows you what it's been missing. She looked at me and held my gaze. You brought us somewhere we didn't even know we needed to go, she said. And now, even here, we feel it. That peace, that shift. My chest swelled, but I didn't cry. Not this time. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I did. After dinner, as the kids chased fireflies and the guitarist played a slowed-down version of Fields of Gold, I walked with Grandma to the garden's edge. She leaned on my arm. I want to frame that photo, she said. The one from Bali. The first night. You and me. I'll print it for you, I said. She nodded. Thank you, darling, for everything. And then she added, You don't need to give us more. You've already given us the thing we didn't even know we'd lost. What's that? I asked. Wonder. Later that week, I dropped off the framed photo. I chose a wide walnut frame with gold inlay. Simple, strong, like her. She placed it on the mantel, right between an old wedding picture and a painted plate from my uncle's first pottery class. Do you see it? She asked. See what in your eyes? You weren't trying to prove anything that night. You were just being. And she was right. That was the moment I stopped performing. And the moment they finally saw me, not as a cautionary tale, not as a fluke, but as a woman who had been building a life while no one was watching. That summer, I traveled again. Not to show off, but because I could. Morocco, then Lisbon, then a quiet cabin in Montana where I painted for 3 days straight and only spoke to the woman at the cafe when I needed more tea. I sent postcards this time, one to Claire. The colors here remind me of that shawl you wore in Bali. One to Grandma, found a carved walking stick I think you'd like. We'll bring it home soon. Even one to Madeline. There's a boutique here with your name all over it. Bold. Expensive. Unapologetic. She replied with a selfie in sunglasses and a smirk. So, basically, me. And maybe for the first time, I didn't mind the joke. Because we weren't competing anymore. We were just learning how to speak differently. That fall, I returned home and launched something new, a mentorship program for young designers from underrepresented backgrounds. I didn't announce it to the family. I didn't put it in the group chat. But somehow, they found out. Madeline sent me a message. I have a friend's daughter who could really use something like that. Mind if I connect you? Eli offered to help with the branding. Claire offered her guest house for a summer residency. They were watching now. Not out of curiosity, out of care. And that, more than any applause, more than any article or accolade, meant something. It meant they weren't just seeing the glow, they were seeing the work behind it, the scaffolding, the structure, the sweat. I visited Grandma again before winter settled in. She wore a knit shawl this time, her hands frailer but her grip still sure. We sat by the fireplace, drinking chamomile tea. The photo still sat on the mantel. You know, she said, tapping her mug. You don't have to take us anywhere else. Ava, you already brought us home. And with those words, the story folded into quiet. No more revenge, no more redemption arcs. Just love, built slowly, held softly, like lanterns in the dark.